Welcome to Flute Q&A number 14 with me, Jane Kavanagh. I'm a flute teacher and I show flute players just like you how to get faster progress on the flute by learning proper technique. The tiny little tweaks of proper technique that make a huge difference to how good you sound and how quickly you progress. So the 5 questions today come from Moira, Anna, Lee, Suzanne, and Langston. Cool name, Langston. Okay, here are the questions. Moira asks, I realize the quality of the flute plays a role, but I've heard professionals make cheap flutes sound beautiful. Does it come down to the shape of a person's lips or mouth? That is such a good question, Moira. Okay, I learned something when I was studying at the Sydney Conservatorium of Music. I just mumbled that. That was the Sydney Conservatorium of Music. So when I was learning flute at a fairly high level, I learned something from a teacher there, and she said, because people are at the stage where they're wanting to spend money, or they think they should spend money on a really, really, really good flute, which is important to have a working flute, by the way. That's no qualms about that. The thing that she said to me was, when you hear someone play the flute, what you hear is the player more than the flute, like significantly more. So when you hear a professional play on a cheap flute, they sound amazing. They don't sound quite as amazing as what they would sound on a really good flute, because the flute does make a difference. But then if you hear a beginner or an amateur flute player play on an amazing flute, they don't sound that much better than if they're playing on just an ordinary student flute. So you hear the player more than the flute, but you definitely need a flute that works. Definitely need a flute that works. And there was something else I was going to say to you, Moira. Hang on. Oh, that's right. Last year, I recorded 2 videos. One was comparing the sound or playing a $100 flute versus a $10,000 flute. So I got 2 flutes and compared them. I'll put a link to the video if you haven't seen it, Moira, or if anyone else is interested in watching it. And then so I recorded that video last year, and then I got so many comments from people saying, you shouldn't buy a $100 flute because they're rubbish and they fall apart. And I went, I think I need to do a video on, which I called, should you buy a cheap flute or should you buy a $100 flute, which I'll put a link to as well. Because it's the reason I did the videos was more just to even up the fact that people sometimes think that they need to spend thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars on a flute to get better at the flute. That's not what makes you better. Spending money is not what makes you better. It's learning proper technique, which is why that's what I teach in my business. Learning proper technique is what makes you better on the flute. And then you need a good flute to support you. So anyway, you can go check out those videos if you haven't already. And then to the question, Moira, that you asked about, does a flute player's mouth or lips, the shape of them, make a difference to how good they sound? Yes, but not as much as you think. Nowhere near as much as what you think. For example, in my experience as a flute teacher, if someone has a really, really big overbite, it's difficult for a flute student to get a small enough hole in their mouth to play with a good sound. So for example, if someone was naturally playing it, you can probably see it on bone there. That overbite opens up the hole, and it's very difficult for someone to get a small hole. Most people don't have a huge overbite like that, so it's very rare to have someone's lips or mouth, the shape of them to actually interfere with their playing. So if this is the first Q&A that you've watched with me, I don't want that to be your memory of the first thing that you heard me play. So I'll just promise you that I can actually play the flute. So that is the example of the shape of someone's mouth or lips or even jaw construction that is not so great for playing flute. But like I said, Moira, it's not as much as you think, because heaps of people come to me and they have trouble with getting a clear sound. And they think maybe it's their flute. Sometimes it is. I mean, sure. They think maybe it's the shape of their mouth. They think maybe they're just not born for the flute. They think maybe they just don't have the skills to play the flute. They think maybe the exercise they're doing is wrong. They think they're blowing in the wrong direction. And some of this is true and some of this is not true. But my point is that so many people think it's something that it's not. To get a clear sound, basically it's 2 steps. Learn the correct embouchure and then refine your embouchure over time. Refining your embouchure refines the sound. That's basically all there is to getting a really, really, really clear sound. You might want to check out a video that I did called the 3 tone exercises to avoid. Sometimes people work really hard at a tone exercise and it doesn't really get them the results that they want. And there's a very good reason for that. It's not the exercise that gets you an improvement in tone, it's the way you practice the exercise. So check out that video. I'll put it linked here for you so that you can have a look at it. And let me just check what else I wanted to say. Yes, the other thing I wanted to say, I'm sure you've done the free mini course about instantly improving your tone. But in case you haven't, and in case anyone is watching this who would like to do the free mini course, I'll put a link to it under Moira's question as well, so that you can do that. That's the introduction into, or it's more than an introduction. It will instantly improve your sound from fixing your embouchure. So that's the correct embouchure I was talking about. Whew, okay, that was a big question, a big answer, more like it. The next question comes from Anna. She says, "Hi Jane, more than a spit bubble, I seem to have a flute filled with condensation after I've played for a bit, which I think affects my sound. Is this likely, and if so, how do I fix this, short of dismantling and cleaning my flute every time or every so often?" So that's a really good question, Anna. You might have seen the video called "Why Does My Flute Dribble?" I will put a link to it here. One of the things I talk about that in that video is the conditions, the environmental conditions that makes your flute dribble. So not big dribble. You're right, it's condensation. I just call it dribble because it's kind of sounds funny, but it is condensation. Cold weather, or I should say cold temperature where you're playing, and humid. So cold and humid. Now, if you live in a place that's not sort of hermetically sealed or is not air conditioned, and the temperature outside is like your inside, for example, where I live, my inside temperature reflects the outside temperature quite well, and it definitely reflects the inside and the outside humidity similar. Cold and humid weather. Now, when I say cold, anything under 20 degrees Celsius is cold for me. Now, don't know what that is in Fahrenheit, but it's basically not cold for most of the world, just for me. So when I say cold, I don't mean like Canada cold. I mean where you need to put on more than one jumper kind of cold. When you get to cold and it's humid, so for example, a cloudy day, like low cloud, or a rainy day, that's a humid day. That is the ultimate conditions for causing condensation inside your flute. So go check out that video if you want to know more. As you can tell, I love weather. There's also a video called How to Get Rid of Spit Bubbles. Now, I suspect that you've watched this, Anna, because you said more than a spit bubble in your question. If you are watching this and you are not Anna and you get spit bubbles in your flute, for example, you're playing along, playing, and let's say you play D sharp and nothing happens. It just sounds like a D. If you have a look at this key that's supposed to open for D sharp, if you get a spit bubble around it and it's a seal of condensation, that stops that sound. Hang on. It stops the flute from sounding like that hole is open. So that's why a D sharp would sound like a D, because it's like that hole is doing nothing. That key is doing nothing. So Anna, more specifically to answer your question, I don't think that the condensation inside your flute, even a significant amount, affects your sound. Maybe a very significant amount would, but if that's the case and it's very significant, like for example on one of those days I was talking about where it's just really cold and you've got a lot of condensation going on, I just do this on my leg and it sort of pools onto my leg and then dries in a few minutes. That might sound gross, but it's not really that gross. I mean, you can do it on the ground as well. Just get rid of it. If you've got so much condensation in your flute that it's dripping out, then definitely get rid of it. But short of that, in my experience, the condensation on the inside of the flute doesn't affect your sound. So that's not to say that it doesn't. It's just, well, I think it doesn't. I think it doesn't affect your sound. I've got to be careful to think, just because I've never experienced it and just because the teachers I've learnt from it have never said anything about it, and just because it hasn't happened to me, I've got to be aware that maybe it does affect your sound. But I'm going to backflip on that. I've never come across that affecting your sound. So I'm suspecting that it's actually something else. But you know your flute, you're sensitive to the way your flute responds, you're sensitive to your own playing. Experiment more and see if you can figure it out. And honestly, if you do some experiments, like, your own sort of experiments, and you find something out, you're like, definitely it affects this note when there's this sort of amount of condensation in there, let me know, because I'm really curious. I've even asked world experts on musical instrument acoustics if it affects their sound, if it affects the sound. And they've pretty much said the same as me. But, we all don't know everything. So you never know. You might be onto something groundbreaking. You never know. Okay, the next question comes from Lee. Lee says, a question about your Flute Academy. Which parts of the course are live versus pre-recorded videos? Can the pre-recorded videos be played back more than once? Are there available places left in the Flute Academy this month? Good question, Lee. So the Flute Academy is where I teach you the step-by-step steps to getting faster progress through learning proper technique. So I teach you about one tweak at a time, one tweak of proper technique at a time in the Flute Academy. One of the biggest things in the Flute Academy that do that is the 45-day flute transformation. So that's a 45-day course. You can actually go at your own pace. It's 45 days of lessons and you get to do one a day, but you can take time. So there's no, you basically go at your own pace. And that transforms your flute playing one tweak at a time. One tweak at a time is good because you don't get overwhelmed. And you also don't get frustrated because I'm keeping you on exactly the right path. Now that, Lee, you get access to that for as long as you're a member of the Flute Academy. And then also within the Flute Academy, there's other lessons. So specifically every month there's a new technique workshop. So the technique workshop, which is new every month, shines a light on a new technique. For example, November is double tonguing. So I teach you in the 4 stages of learning to get clear and fast double tonguing. That's in November, and the technique workshops you'll have access to for 12 months inside the Flute Academy. So they'll be viewable for 12 months. Now there's also every month a repertoire class, and where you learn a new piece every month, new flute repertoire with me. That's pre-recorded, by the way. Everything I've said so far is pre-recorded. And you get access to, when you're in the Flute Academy, you're able to view the repertoire class for 12 months as well, each one for 12 months. So November's will be available for 12 months, and then December's will be available for 12 months, and so on. Then every month there's a masterclass, so that's where a featured student gets a lesson from me, like a recorded lesson, and this is recorded, and you can view that for 1 month inside the Flute Academy. Now, the only thing that is live and in person on Zoom, is the online concert. So you don't need to be a pro to come along and play at this concert. It's just a piece that you've been working towards that you want to, well, you can either show it off to us, that's as in the members of the Flute Academy, the students in the Flute Academy, or you can use it as motivation. You can use the online concert as a motivation to work on something and then, work up to playing it in the concert, which is pretty cool. So that's the online concert's the only thing that's live. Everything else is pre-recorded, and I've told you the length of time that you get access to it for. And yes, there are places left. I'll put a link below your question. The next question comes from Suzanne. Hi Jane, you mentioned in one of your Flute Academy modules that you had to correct a hand position while you studied in France. What did you do to correct this issue, and how long did it take you to be comfortable once you made the corrections? The hand position correction that I did was actually in Australia when I was about 21 or something. And it was that because I'd learnt the flute as a kid, and it was very long for me as a kid, as it is for every kid, every non-adult sized human that learns the flute does a bit of stretching. My right hand pinky had to stretch and reach for this key, and as I grew up and became adult sized, my hand stayed like that. So the hand position that I had to shift was this. Now, day 15 of the 45-day flute transformation is called untwist your right wrist. And it's exactly the steps to untwist your right wrist and how to get used to it. It took me, I was playing every day. Maybe I was playing like half an hour a day. And it took me a week of it feeling completely weird, because it was the difference between having a dead straight right pinky and a curved pinky. Completely different. Well, that was very loud. A completely different feel to my hand. For a week, it was like, whoa, this is so weird. 2 weeks, I think I was pretty much used to it within 2 weeks. And then that was that. Then the rest is history. Just wanted to say that. But no, it's true. I got used to it after about 2 weeks. Then what else did I have to say for you? No, that was it. Suzanne, I hope that helps. There were things that changed in my playing in France, significant things, but that was to do with breathing and embouchure mostly. The last question today comes from Langston. How do I play 16th notes and other quick notes on the flute? So I have the perfect video for you, Langston. It is called 5 Tricks to Speed Up Your Flute Fingers. I have linked to it below for you. It's a video I did a few months ago, and it goes through 5 things specifically, 5 tricks. Only one of them is a trick. One of them is a brain trick to think about what you're doing differently, and that's a trick. The other 4 are legit techniques to speeding up your fingers. For example, identifying and removing tension that's in your body that's slowing down your fingers. Another example is how to practice efficiently so that you use your time really efficiently so that you're getting the hard bits faster of a piece, and the bits that you can already play, you're not practicing those as much as the hard bits, but more detail in the video that I've linked to. And then also fixing your hand position. So for example, in the question before from, who was it, Suzanne, when I changed my hand position from that to that, my fingers got so much faster. So that's not the only thing in your hands that can be sort of a bit out of whack, but when you fix your hand position and you fix the balance of the flute in your hands, hugely speeds up your fingers. And that is the reason that there's a whole module in the Flute Academy about balance of the flute, stability. It's a stability module, and it talks about balance, and it's the pre-module to speeding up your flute fingers. So faster fingers is a later module in the Flute Academy or in the transformation I was talking about before. But before that, we talk about stability of the flute. It's so important for speeding up your fingers. So there you go. Go watch the video. That is the Q&A for today. I hope you might like my plethora of lilies today. I got a bit overwhelmed with lilies this week. I was going to say that I bought, no, the pink one's for a present and the orange ones are my neighbours. So have a great week. Thanks for being here in this Q&A this week, this month, this week, this number 14, and I'll see you next time. Bye.